Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Cup of Faith. The name that we're going to be talking about this morning is a real tough one to say, so just bear with me. And if I say it wrong a few times, just kind of go along with it. But it's hard to say, and it's Yahweh Sabaoth. Yahweh Sabaoth. And the translation for this name means Lord Almighty, the Lord of armies, or the Lord of hosts. And this name for God occurs over 230 times in the Bible. And it reminds us of God's strength and his rule and his reign and his royal sovereignty over all of creation. It also reminds us of God's power over the people and the principalities that oppose his will. An awesome picture of Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord Almighty, is the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. His power and his might extend further and farther than even death can take us. And a familiar place that it shows up for us in the Bible is in that story of David and Goliath. And I'm sure we all know that, remember that story, but the Israelites and the Philistines had met in this valley to do battle, and the Philistines were on one side and the Israelites were on the other. And the Philistines had this soldier named Goliath. It was this huge giant, almost 10 feet tall. He was powerful and he frightened the whole Israelite army, even their king Saul. And every day he would come out and he would mock the Israelites and challenge them to one-on-one combat. No one ever took him up on the offer, though, because they were afraid, because he was this huge giant with a big sword and shield and javelin and all this stuff. So we have the giant here, and then enters into the story is David, this young man. And David would have been about between the ages of 13 and 16 probably, and his brothers were fighting in Saul's army. And David tended his father's sheep and went back and forth between the sheep fields and the battlefields to bring supplies to his brothers. And while he was tending the flocks, his father's flocks, David had seen God's provision and protection many times in the past. And he even tells Saul, that the king, that David had been able to kill bears and lions to protect the flocks of his father. And in David's mind, this situation was no different, only instead of sheep, there was now the armies of Israel. And instead of bears and lions, there was this giant Goliath. And most of us, again, know the story. David convinces the king to let him go fight Goliath. And David turns down the king's armor and instead grabs these 5 smooth stones and his sling and his staff, and he goes out to meet the giant. And after David is mocked by the giant, David responds by saying, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty," or Yahweh Sabaoth. It's like David is saying, you brought twigs and stones to this fight, and I brought a nuclear bomb. And David goes on to say in verse 47, "All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword and spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's. He will give all of you into our hands." Then we know that this young man with a rock and a sling defeats this giant Goliath. You know, all God needed to defeat the giant, who had a sword and a shield and a javelin and armor, and he's super strong, all these muscles. All he needed was a small rock in the hand of a small, insignificant boy. It was God's way of demonstrating that he is the Lord Almighty, that he is Yahweh Sabaoth, and that he is the Lord of armies and the Lord of hosts. And one of the things that I love about this story is the 2 fields that we see. We have the battlefield, which is big, with lives in danger, with potentially huge consequences that would have had national repercussions had the Philistines defeated the Israelites. You know, lives and territory and the very reputation of God were at stake. And then on the other side, we have these grazing fields where David is tending his father's flocks. You know, there's sheep there, they're wandering around, this boy is tending to them. You know, by comparison, the consequences and responsibilities are much, much lower, and they're even exponentially lower than they are on the battlefield. Yet David tells Saul that in those fields, the Lord was with him, watching out for him and protecting him. And that's a huge encouragement to me, and I hope it is to you too. Yahweh Sabaoth, the God Almighty, is not just mighty in battles and when we're in dire situations and when his reputation is on the line. He is also mighty in those little moments in our lives where he shows up and it brings no glory or no honor to him, but it brings peace and comfort and provision and protection to us. My Sunday school teacher used to say, there is no problem too big or too small for God. So as you go throughout your day and the rest of your week, remember that God is almighty, that he is sovereign over all creation. Bring all of your worries and burdens, big and small, to him because he cares about you. I want to end with these amazing words from a chorus that I've sang and prayed many times in my life in those big and those small situations. And it goes like this. I cast all my cares upon you. I lay all my burdens down at your feet. And any time I don't know what to do, I will cast all my cares upon you. God bless and have an amazing day.